Hello and welcome. I'm Garth Allen. This is Racing News Now. And hold up. Don't hit that dislike button just yet. Hear me out. Listen to the video. Listen to what I have to say here. And if by the end of the video you still don't like what I have to say, feel free to hit the dislike button. I won't mind, but at least you will have listened. But I might surprise you with what I'm going to say in this video. It may not be what you are quite expecting. So we're doing something a little bit different today, obviously. You see me down here in the corner, and we see Eric Estep up on the screen here. This has been quite the interesting week for ARCA in the YouTube community as well as the main NASCAR media community. There's been a lot of talk about Winchester on Saturday night, and rightfully so, both with the Taylor Gray-Daniel Dye incident as well as the Corey Heim-Ty Gibbs incident. Now, has it all been justified? That's for you to decide. I'm not here to make those decisions for you. I'm just the intermediate journalist here presenting everything to you. But there's been a lot of talk. You've probably seen this video by now. If you haven't, I'll have the full video linked down below in the description. I'm going to be reacting to some of the things that Eric Estep said in this video. The ARCA is a bloodbath video. But then, there was a response to this from ARCA PR Director Charlie Krall. You know who that is. We've had him on this channel many times to talk about different things that ARCA's done throughout the season, both good and bad. And it's been nice, because that's one thing I've always strived to do is, if I'm going to call ARCA out for something that I don't see as right, I always feel it necessary to have Charlie on, or whoever might be involved in the incident, to give their side of the story if they're willing to come on and talk about it. And Charlie has always been fantastic about coming on and giving the series perspective on some of the things that have happened. Sometimes they'll admit that they've done something wrong. Sometimes they will admit that maybe we're not seeing it from the correct perspective. I'll give Charlie credit in that sense. He's always been great to explain things from a series perspective. Well, Casey Campbell was doing his preview show for Watkins Glen this week. They had a long discussion about the incidents at Winchester, and not just the incidents at Winchester, but the NASCAR YouTube community. He never called out Eric Estep by name, but he might as well have. Let's first look at some of the things that Eric said in his video, and we'll discuss it, whether he was right or he was wrong. Then we'll listen to what Charlie has to say from the series perspective.
ARCA is useless now. Too often these races devolve into teenagers just driving through each other.
Okay, first off, I know you gotta have an attention getter at the beginning of the video, and that sure gets the attention, but he's being a little dramatic here. Isn't that what ARCA has always been to an extent? That's not necessarily a bad thing. You kind of have to have ARCA for that point, because if you don't, that's either going to happen in the trucks, or that's going to happen in super late models. So ARCA has its place, and I've always said that. I've never been one to say, well, we need to get rid of ARCA. There's been a lot of folks in both the YouTube community and in the mainstream media that have said that ARCA is useless at this point and it doesn't need to exist. I have never said that. Even back when I did that video about how we can fix the NASCAR ladder, I specifically kept ARCA on the ladder and got rid of the Xfinity series in what I projected as how to fix the ladder. I have always said that ARCA has a place in this sport. I love the ARCA Menard series, and I think there's a way to keep it around. So already starting off on not necessarily a great foot here.
You know, if we saw these kinds of races like once a year or once every 2 or 3 years, I would say, hey, it's just a memorable night of stock car short track action. But unfortunately, these types of incidents really are no stranger to the ARCA Menard series these days, so that's what I want to talk about today.
Except that they are. I don't know how much attention you've been paying to ARCA this year, Eric, but we really haven't had hardly anybody intentionally wrecking each other, at least that have made it as blatantly obvious as it was made Saturday night. The last time I can remember, and I may be forgetting a time, but the last time I can remember something this big happening was 2018 at Salem, the Zane Smith-Michael Self incident. That's been, what, 3 years ago? I mean, sure, we have some beating and some banging, and we have guys wrecking each other every once in a while. Corey Heim with the bump and run at Elko a couple weeks ago. But he didn't outright wreck Ty Gibbs. Unless I'm forgetting something, I don't remember that happening at all this year. And I don't remember it happening last year either. Again, I think the last time it happened was 2018. So I don't think Eric is paying as close of attention to ARCA as what he's trying to play off here, because it's not happening near as much as what he's trying to make you believe here.
No matter the reason, it's never a good idea to hook a guy in the right rear going down the straightaway. I don't care if it's a big track or a short track. That's just not a good idea, especially in ARCA when these cars are very expensive to run and the payouts in ARCA are not what they used to be. Tearing up equipment like that is terrible.
Now, I will give Eric credit here. He is 100% correct on this point. It is never a good idea to right rear somebody. There is never an excuse that that is okay. Left rearing somebody is different than right rearing somebody. There is a reason that the Christian Eckes Ben Rhodes incident from Texas last year was so scrutinized, and everybody got all up on Ben Rhodes after that incident, because right rearing is not okay. Never has been, never will be. If Taylor was mad at something Daniel had done, whether it be cleanly passing him in 3 and 4 there, or if something had happened before that, there's a better way to get your retaliation in, and to do it not so dirty.
How are we supposed to judge up-and-coming talent when, once again, these races often seem to devolve into just who can drive through the most cars en route to victory? Stuff that is not going to fly once you get into the...
Except, again, they don't. Other than Corey's bump and run on Ty at Elko, and Ty dumping Corey at Winchester, when's the last time a race devolved to something like that? And again, I'm not saying Corey was wrong in his dump and run at his bump and run at Elko, because that's just classic short track racing. He didn't wreck Ty at Elko. We're not talking about we're not talking about Winchester right now. We're talking about Elko. I don't understand why Eric keeps coming back to this of, oh, these races devolve to this so often, when they really don't.
The NASCAR Xfinity or the NASCAR Cup Series. You just can't judge talent in ARCA anymore. For one, there's only like 5 competitive cars on a weekly basis, and the guys driving those 5 competitive cars are like 16, 17, 18 years old, so even if you win, like, who are you really beating? There's not enough clean, consistent driving out there. Too many...
Wait a minute. Did Eric just suggest what I think he just suggested? Because I don't think a lot of fans would be happy about this. He just said there's only 5 competitive cars out there, and the guys driving them are like 16, 17, 18 years old, so who are you really beating? Is he suggesting that someone like Kyle Busch come down to the ARCA Menard Series, and then if you win an ARCA race, then you've really won something? I don't think he was going quite that extreme with it, but I think he was suggesting something similar to that. I don't know how I feel about that, because I mean that we've got guys like Brandon Jones that come. Brandon Jones is at Mid-Ohio, and he'll be at Watkins Glen this weekend in the 25 for Venturini. Did he win at Mid-Ohio? No, he did not. While, yes, a lot of the time it is teenagers in these cars, you do have guys from Xfinity and Trucks coming down every so often. Chase Briscoe came down and won the ARCA West race at Sonoma, and he's going to be at Watkins Glen this weekend as well. So, while it doesn't happen every race, there is more competition than just up-and-coming teenagers in this series. Some races, yes, that's all you have. And that's fine, because that's what ARCA is.
These kids want to be Dale Earnhardt and not enough want to be Mark Martin. I'm sorry, but it does not require talent to just drive through someone on quarter entry or wreck someone intentionally down the straightaway. Put me behind the wheel of a race car. I know how to not use the brakes. I can do that.
Okay, so, again, I'm gonna side with Eric a little bit on this point. This does make sense to an extent. Most of the up-and-coming drivers right now, save for maybe a couple, do tend to lean more on the Dale Earnhardt side of the spectrum than they do on the Mark Martin side of the spectrum. Now, I think a lot of that has to do with the way NASCAR has promoted itself in recent years, the whole winning your into the playoffs, and how they promote themselves in commercials with all the wrecking and the fights and everything else, and that just gets instilled in these drivers in, that's how I've got to drive, that's how I've got to act. when it's not necessarily the best way to go about things, but that's the sport we're in right now.
Or if you're Joe Gibbs, start fielding late models and put Ty Gibbs in a late model. Send him to all the big events and see how he stacks up against the Bubba Pollards and Stephen Nassies of the world. Even if it's just some one-offs, he will learn a lot more there than he's learning in ARCA right now. And we'll finally be able to more accurately judge his skill level. I'm sorry, but...
Okay, now I will say, he's not completely wrong in that you put Ty Gibbs in a late model or something other than ARCA, he's probably going to learn more than he would right now in the current state of ARCA, given that there's not a lot of competitive cars in the series right now. And that's something I have been really hammering home for months now, is we need more competitive cars in ARCA. It's not about the full field size. It's about how many competitive cars you have, both from a fan standpoint and from a driver standpoint. I've mostly been hammering that home from a fan standpoint because it would give us better races to watch. But from a driver standpoint, it gives them more competition to test themselves against and gives them a better measuring stick. Right now, there's not too many competitive cars to measure yourself against in the ARCA Menard series. Now, do I think that means the ARCA Menard series should go away and not exist anymore? No, because the ARCA Menard series has the potential to grow itself back into that kind of a series. But right now, it's not in that position. And I'm worried by some of the things that I've seen from the series, that it seems more like they want to just raise the car count overall, and they're not as concerned with how many competitive cars are in there. Like, we've got 30 cars at Watkins Glen this weekend, but how many of those are actually going to be competitive and racing for the win? I'm going to say 5 to 8 at most. Without looking at the entry list right now and seeing who exactly all is on there, I'm going to say 5 to 8 at most. And that's more than we've got in most races, to be honest. More cars than we've got that are actually fast enough to go up and compete for the win. It's usually not more than like 3 or 4. That's not a good measuring stick if you're a driver to be able to see how you stack up against some of the better drivers, some of the better teams, when there's not a lot of competition there to begin with. Alright, so that's the famous, infamous, whatever you want to call it, Eric Estep ARCA is a Bloodbath video. Like I said, I'll have it linked down below in the description if you want to see the full video if you haven't seen it yet. Might be a good idea to just watch and get the full context of everything, since we just kind of jumped through at some of the points that I wanted to talk about. Now, let's move on to Casey Campbell's preview show for this week, where he had Charlie Krall on, the ARCA Menards PR director. Like I've said, you know who that is if you've been around here before. Good guy to talk to. Someone that I consider a friend, and someone that I always have a great time chatting with, both when we have him on RNN and at the track. He's a good guy. Some of the things he says in here we'll discuss, because I think he's getting a little antagonistic about some of these things that are genuine criticisms that need to be brought up about the series. So let's look at some of this, and again, this will also be linked down below in the description. If you haven't seen Casey's preview show yet, go watch that. Casey's always a good one to watch.
I'm going to step away from my official duties as ARCA propaganda minister, and I'm going to step into race fan mode for a moment. So, all right, so let's think about it. Let's say these commentators get what they want and ARCA suddenly ceases to exist. Instead of having what happened at Winchester in front of 2,000 people or 2,500 people on MAV TV, now all of a sudden that's happening in front of 40,000 people at Bristol Motor Speedway in a truck race. You know, there's a reason why.
Can't get it to pause for some reason. And Charlie's exactly right, and I think I said that earlier in this video. Yes, if ARCA doesn't exist, that exact same thing is going to happen either in a truck race or in a super late model race. Obviously, the super late model race obviously wouldn't be in front of as many people, but more than likely it would end up happening in a truck race. And do you really, if you don't want it to happen in ARCA, I don't think you're going to want it to happen in the trucks any more than that.
That's what this platform is for, Casey. It's here for drivers to learn how to do this. That's what a developmental league is. That's why AAA baseball exists. That's why single A baseball level exists, because these players don't know how to play at a major league level yet. And you don't want to, you could take the most talented kid in the world and throw him on the New York Yankees or the Chicago Cubs and say, okay, you're ready to go play Major League Baseball. Now it's time for the World Series. You think he's going to perform at his very peak, the very first game he ever suits up?
Well, okay, so to rebut that, most people probably wouldn't, but there are exceptions to that rule, and we saw that this year with Ty Gibbs going out and winning his first Xfinity race. So, while I do agree that most of the time Charlie is correct, that doesn't necessarily apply to everybody. There would be people that, if you threw them straight into Trucks, Xfinity, Cup, whatever, they would still be able to rise to the top.
You know, the career racer who wants to come and, you know, Greg Van Alst, here's a guy who had a fantastic race, finished second on a limited budget, and no one's talking about him because...
Wrong. I did talk about him in the Rewind show. Now, I probably didn't talk about him as much as I should have, but I did bring up how great that was that he did finish second and that he had such a great race overall. In fact, I think, now that I think about it, I think I talked about him more than what I thought I did. So, somebody talked about him.
And to me, it's insulting to read or listen to some of this commentary online about people who have never been in our garage area, who have never reached out to me for comment, who have never talked to any of our drivers, who have never talked to any of our teams, to sit there and say, well, ARCA doesn't have a place in the motorsports world.
Okay, well, first off, the fact that he says it's insulting, I think, Charlie, I think you're taking this a little too personally, and you need to, like, remove yourself from it a little bit. I know that you're the PR director and all, but some of these criticisms are legitimate criticisms, and everything is not always, to steal a line from my old ag teacher in high school, everything's not always sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. Everything's not always perfect. There are legit criticisms being presented that should be heard and should be addressed. Now, do some people take it too far and say that ARCA shouldn't exist? Yes. But to dismiss everything as, oh, well, this isn't right, these people shouldn't be listened to, that's not really the best way to look at this. And also, I hope I'm not being lumped into this group, because everything that he just mentioned, everything that he just listed off there, I have done, and I have tried to push the ARCA Menard series as much as I possibly can, because I love this series. I think it's a fantastic series, and I want it to be the best that it possibly can be. So I hope I'm not being put into this same category, and if I am, we need to have a little chat, because I feel I'm wrongfully being put into this category if I am. I've done nothing but try to help the ARCA Menard series from day one here on RNN, but I digress. Speaking of taking things personally, well, let's get back into this.
You buy into this stuff, Casey, and it just perpetuates itself. These folks are seriously unhappy people. It makes me sad to read some of that commentary, because, you know, I can tell they love the sport, but their perception is wrong on it. You know, it's not all doom and gloom. It's really not. It's really, really not.
Okay, now, while that argument can be used for a lot of things on the internet, again, I don't think we should be dismissing all of the negativity thrown toward ARCA as just unhappy trolls living in their mom's basement that don't know anything about how anything works in racing. I think that's gone a step too far, and again, everything is not always sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. There are legitimate criticisms that should be and need to be brought up about this series. It's not perfect, but it can get better. There is a way to get it better, and to just outright dismiss every criticism that is thrown toward the series, I don't think is a good way to go about things.
Andy Jankowiak's another great.
Yeah.
He's a pizza delivery driver.
Yeah.
And he's He's doing this. I was a pizza delivery driver in college, Casey. I couldn't figure out how to pay for a race car. He's done it, and he's doing very, very well. These are the types of stories that I think we should be talking about, not the.
And I agree. We should be talking about the Greg Van Alst and the Andy Jankowiaks. And honestly, I've not done as good of a job as I should have at talking about some of these guys. I've mentioned them in Rewind shows, but that's about it. I haven't gotten Greg Van Alst or Andy Jankowiak or any of these guys on for an interview, and I really should. But again, to just say, well, this is what we should be talking about and not the bad things, you can't just sweep the bad things under the rug. The bad things still exist and need to be talked about.
Look at that race at Colorado National the other night. Last year, that race ran with 11 cars in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
This year, we had 18 cars. That's almost double.
And again, I will give him credit. ARCA, they are pulling themselves out of the hole that they were in last year. And most of that hole was because of COVID. And the car counts shrank a lot last year. Car counts are going back up. But again, does it really matter if car counts are going back up if it's just a bunch of back markers? We need the competitive cars. Now, we're going to have more competitive cars this weekend at Watkins Glen, but can that carry over to every other race? Or are we going to go back to just the 20 and the 18 being the two fastest cars on the track, and maybe the 2, the 46, the 25, somebody like that, the 15, actually maybe getting up there to compete for the win? Because that's what it is most weeks, and we need more competitive cars. That's what we need. A bigger field is nice, but if all it's doing is adding more lap traffic in the way, does that really help anything?
Well, I invite the ARCA is a bloodbath folks to come to one of our races one time, meet some of the people that work on these race cars, meet the people who put these races on. Seriously, folks, it's not all doom and gloom.
Okay, so he didn't specifically call out Eric Estep there, but he basically called out Eric Estep, calling it the ARCA is a bloodbath group. And that feels to me like he's calling out, he's already said YouTubers, so I feel like he's calling out the entire YouTube community in general. And again, Charlie, I hope I'm not on that list.
You know, everyone's entitled to an opinion, even when it's wrong.
There again, okay, even when it's wrong, you can't outright dismiss all of this as being wrong. Now, were a lot of Eric's points in his video wrong? Yes. Or to an extent they were wrong. But to outright say everything that's negative, everything that's doom and gloom about this series is wrong, that's not a good path to go down.
All right, I'm going to go flip my chicken.
All right, sounds good.
All right, so let's talk. Did Eric make some good points? Yes. Did Charlie make some good points? Yes. Did they both make some questionable points? Yes. Somewhere in the middle is the correct answer. Somewhere in between the ARCA is perfect and ARCA needs to go away, somewhere in there is the correct answer to all of this going forward and the way that we all live happily and harmoniously going forward. Now, I'm going to extend the invitation to Charlie. Charlie, you have my number. You know how to get a hold of me. If you want to continue this discourse, if you want to rebut anything I've said in this, please get a hold of me. We will figure out when to record this and when to get this done. We can discuss this at length, because I never want this kind of thing to be one-sided. I've always strived on this channel to get every side of the story possible, whether it be a criticism I've had of the series. I will make sure Charlie is on to give the series perspective on whatever it was that happened. If something controversial happens between drivers on the track, I do my best to get those drivers on to discuss whatever happened and give their side of the story. I never want anything on here to be one-sided and to not give sides that need to be given. So, Charlie, if you want to discuss this more, great. If you've said everything you feel like you need to say, that's fine too. Just reach out to me if you want to continue this discussion. But I think that's going to about do it for this one. So if you made it this far and you still want to hit that dislike button, go ahead. As long as you have made it to this point and you have listened and absorbed everything I've said and at least thought about it, and you still don't like what I have to say, that's fine. I don't mind, as long as you have listened and absorbed and thought about it. So that's about all we got for you. So thank you, as always, to our Patreon supporter, Regional Manager William Holmes. Thank you, as always, for your support. It is greatly appreciated. If you would like to be a patron of RNN, the link is down below in the description. Patreon.com/RacingNewsNow. Not required by any means, but definitely appreciated when you want to support RNN in that way. But that's going to about do it. So at that, I'm Garth Allen for Racing News Now.